Good morning, everybody. Like I say, it's a special day today, Rosh Chodesh, and we're going to learn something which I hope you will find to be very powerful. Last week, we learned about the spiritual personalities of Hillel and Shammai. That was like an introduction to the Mishnahs that we're going to be doing, please God, this week and the next few weeks, because there are a number of Mishnahs attributed to Hillel in the first chapter of Pirkei Avos. And then after that, there's obviously the opinion of Shammai as well. So what we're going to do today is get straight into the first Mishnah with the background that we did last week, which effectively distinguished between the roles and perspective of Hillel and Shammai being aligned with the energies of Chesed and Gevurah respectively. So Hillel is the Chesed person. Hillel is the person who sees the opportunity to include people, who's very tolerant, very inclusive, and who believes that really the goal of the Jewish experience is to be accessible, to make Hashem as accessible as possible. Not that he disagrees with Shammai. He believes, as Shammai does, that we have tremendous potential and we should aspire to all kinds of great levels of connection. Realistically, though, not everybody is at that point, and so we want to make Judaism, so to speak, as all-encompassing and inclusive as possible. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the Mishnah, the first Mishnah attributed to Hillel. Hillel v'Shammai kiblu mehem. That's how the Mishnah begins, that Hillel and Shammai both received the oral tradition from their teachers and predecessors, Shmaya and Avtalion. Hillel oimer. So Hillel says, Hevei mitalmidov shel Aharon. You should be a student of Aaron. I think it's quite apt that we're learning this Mishnah this week, because the parasha this week is all about the position that Aaron had in the community and the challenge against that position, and then Hashem's endorsement of that position. So this is a good time to be reading about Aaron. So what does he tell us? You should be a student of Aaron, and that means the following. Number one, oihev shalom, to be somebody who loves peace. Secondly, veroidev shalom. Not only should you love peace in the generic, general sense, but you should be proactive about it and you should pursue peace. Oiheves habrios, you should love all, and for now we're going to translate it as people. You should love all people. Umekarvan la Torah, and draw them close to Torah. So there's quite a lot to discuss over here, because even though it seems that he's giving us a very straightforward message, which sounds like be nice, care about peace, be the kind of person who wants to bring everybody together. On the face of it, that's what he's telling us. But we have to ask ourselves a few important questions. Remember, of course, that Pirkei Avos, even though people love Pirkei Avos, why? Because it talks about being a mensch, and everybody loves the concept of being a mensch and developing good character. Yes, it's true, that is what Pirkei Avos is about. At the same time, though, we've already established that Pirkei Avos is not the strict letter of the law. Pirkei Avos is lifnim mishuras hadin, what you are required to do beyond the letter of the law. So, to love peace, surely that is the letter of the law, don't you think? I mean, there's a halacha that says very clearly that a person, a Jewish person, may not engage in machloikas, in conflict. Shaloi lahachzik bidei. That, by the way, this also relates directly to the parasha this week. Not to hold on or strengthen or support those who engage in machloikas. Now, not everybody necessarily knows. It's interesting. It's a cultural thing. Depends which Jewish community you belong to. So in certain parts of the world, the word machloikas is very familiar, and I suppose you should say, unfortunately. And in other parts of the world, like here in South Africa, we're much more used to the word faribel. You know, faribel. Every family's got one. You know what I mean? It's very much, unfortunately, part of our language and part of our experience as Jewish people. But halachically, according to the strict letter of the law, you're not supposed to in any way engage in machloikas, in conflict. So what's the lifnim mishuras hadin? What is he telling us over here that is pushing yourself further than what the Torah requires? Okay, so that's something that we have to consider. That's one question. The other question is, why Dafka say, be a student of Aaron? Why doesn't Hillel just simply say these three things? Ohev Shalom, Roidev Shalom, Oyevas Abrios, and Makarvan Torah. Just tell us straight that it's a value in Judaism to love peace and to pursue it, and to love people and to draw them close. Why is it necessary? How does it add to our understanding to know that you should be a student of Aaron? Bear in mind that Mishnah language is incredibly concise and precise. In other words, the Mishnah doesn't say things for flowery reference or just to give it, to bulk up the content. Whatever is written in Mishnah is weighed very carefully and chosen very carefully. So if Hillel specifies that you should be a student of Aaron, that somehow is a big part of this conversation. The other thing that we need to wonder about is the usage of this word brios. Because effectively what he's telling us is that you should love all people and engage them in such a way that you draw them close to Torah. That's effectively the message. So why doesn't he then say people? There are nice words we have in Hebrew that could mean people. You could say ohev ha'anoshim, love people. Or you could say love your fellow, right? Or whatever. There are a whole lot of different words. What is the specific relevance of this word brios, which if you had to translate it directly actually means creatures? Wow, that's an interesting reference. Love all creatures. So is this now suddenly telling us, because remember that it's in the direct context of umakarvan la Torah, maybe that means you should bring your pet to shul, because it says brios, all creatures, and then it says bring them close to the Torah. So what is he actually telling us in this particular context? And lastly, bear in mind that we have a principle which says that Seder in Torah is also Torah. The order in which things are presented within Torah is in itself a lesson. So that means to say the way he puts things, first Oyev Abrios and then Makarvan la Torah, that obviously also must have relevance for us. So let's start at the beginning. How much do we know about Aaron Kohen Gadol? He's a very famous personality, not only because he was the brother of the greatest Jewish leader ever, Moshe Rabbeinu. Why is he so famous? What's the big deal about Aaron? What is he renowned for? I kind of feel like if we were face to face at this point, we'd actually have this conversation. It's the downside of the Zoom context, right? Unless, of course, you want to unmute or write something on the chat. What's Aaron most famous for? We do know that he was beloved by everybody. The difference between Moshe and Aaron is that when Moshe dies, it says that the people mourned his passing. When Aaron passes away, it says all the people mourned his passing. And you understand the difference between them because Moshe was the bad cop and Aaron was the good cop. In other words, Moshe had told people things about their lives that they did not necessarily want to listen to. Again, this week's Torah portion, case in point. They didn't like the fact that he set up a hierarchical structure of leadership. They disagreed with it. So nobody likes, I don't want to say nobody, but you'll never get a rabbi that everybody likes, right? There has to be at least one issue with a rabbi. He was too strict, he was too lenient, he had double standards, he likes the people with money or the people, whatever. There's always got to be something. So that was Moshe. Aaron, on the other hand, was the people's person. He had a magnificent way of connecting with people and having this meaningful, uplifting engagement with them. So what does he tell us here? You should be like a student of Aaron. Now we need to analyze that because there are two really important parts of that description that are insightful into what we're supposed to do in the way that we treat people and in the way that we so-called pursue peace. So what do we know about Aaron? Two things. One, you're probably already thinking about, and the other, you probably know, and you definitely know, but in this particular context, it's not top of mind. So we'll start with that one. We'll start with the one that's not top of mind, although it should be the most obvious thing. Aaron is the Kohen Gadol. Let's understand for a second what that means, what that role entails, what it tells you about the person. Kohen Gadol, high priest, means that he is one of, if not the most spiritual people in the community at the time. Maybe in Aaron's case, it's a toss-up between him and Moshe, and I don't think they had a running competition between the two of them. But Aaron definitely qualifies as one of the holiest people in the nation at the time. So, what's that got to do with our conversation? Yes, he was a holy man. We got it. Why is that relevant in our conversation? And specifically to tell us that we should be students of Aaron. Well, what did Aaron do that nobody else could do? And again, let's go to this week's Torah portion. Why is there such a groundswell, or at least led by Korach and his rebellion against Aaron? What did he do that others could not do? What is the single most unique role of the Kohen Gadol? That he enters the Holy of Holies. And by the way, that's not just once a year in Yom Kippur that he goes into the Holy of Holies and that's his big event of the year. That is a statement about who he is. That tells us, in fact, the Torah uses that word. The Torah says that he was niskadesh kodesh kadashim, that he was sanctified. Aaron was sanctified at the highest level of holiness. He is the creme de la creme. He is the absolute elite. He is the top spiritual person in the community. You know what happens when you're at that level of spirituality? You know what can happen? You could very easily feel a little bit aloof and a little bit above the average person. It happens often. Oh, I'm very learned. I'm very religious. I'm very spiritual. You are ordinary. You're not as religious as I am. You're not as learned as I am, or you're not as spiritual as I am. And therefore I have the right to look down my nose at you and patronize you. That, unfortunately, is part of human experience. That very, very often, together with that spiritual edge, comes a little bit of a sense of superiority. That's why Hillel wants us to know that we need to be students of Aaron. Aaron, in spite of the fact that he sat at the pinnacle of spiritual experience, he was at the top of the hierarchy of the Jewish community, that did not stop him from relating to the average person with absolute care and love and respect. That's the message over here. You're right. There is a halacha, there's a din, there is a law in Judaism that says you may not involve yourself in faribel, in machloikas, in conflict. You're not allowed to. That's the law. Aaron didn't just not involve himself in conflict. Aaron went to the opposite extreme. He stretched himself from the highest levels of spiritual connection all the way down to the most ordinary person to try not only have a relationship with them, but what he was most famous for, to bring peace into their lives. And that's what he's very renowned for, bringing peace into people's lives. So, let's explore that. What did he do? Right? He has a very renowned, famous, unique style that he used to be able to connect to people, to be able to bring people together. Whether it was a shalom bayis issue, where there was a breakdown in relationship between husband and wife, or whether it was friends who were in conflict, it didn't make a difference. He used the same method. Does anybody remember what Aaron's method was? Very famous method that he used in order to bring people who were in conflict back together again. How did he bring peace? This is obviously important for us because Hillel says we have to be a student of Aaron. That means not only in the generic sense of he cared for people, even though he was very lofty, he still came down to their level, and he didn't forget the people who were, so to speak, the ordinary folk. But we have to be a student of Aaron. A student of Aaron means study his approach, study his attitude, and understand what that attitude teaches us. So let's ask ourselves that question. What was Aaron's unique method? So let's say, for argument's sake, that there was a couple in conflict, something that, thank God, doesn't happen much, right? Baruch Hashem, Shalom Bayis is solid and everybody's good, especially when they've been locked in the same house as their spouse for 3 months without a break. It's really helpful for Shalom Bayis. So what happens? You've got these people who are they're not speaking to each other. They've had a fallout, where, again, whether it be husband and wife, whether it be friends. What did Aaron do? So he went over to the one party and he said, listen, I've just had a conversation with your husband and he feels terrible about what's been going on and he really wants to apologize, but he's just a little bit embarrassed of the fact that, he misbehaved and he's got a little bit of male ego. It's not so easy for him to apologize. Like, he really wants to, he just can't bring himself to do it. So she would then say, oh, wow, he really wants to apologize. I'm so touched. I thought he was so stuck up. I thought he was so stubborn. I thought he was so caught up in his particular view and wasn't willing to shift. Well, if he is ready to apologize, to be honest, I would forgive him and I would apologize as well. And then Aaron would quickly run over to the husband and say, you won't believe this, but I had a conversation with your wife. And she feels so terrible about what happened. And she wants to make up, but she's afraid that maybe you're still angry at her. So, she's a little bit shemzach. She's a little bit wary to come forward and to apologize. And he says, really? I feel so terrible about the way that I behaved. I promise you, if she would come over and say something to me, I would for sure forgive her. And so he'd go back and forth between the two of them and eventually get them to shalom, to a position of peace. And he'd do the same thing with friends, business partners, whoever it was. It was this game, right? Go to the one, whisper in their ear that the other one actually wants to make up. And then he goes to the other one and says, so we have a very simple question that we have to ask about this. Is it honest? Is it honest? I mean, let's be honest. We often say that for the sake of peace, you're allowed to use a white lie. And that's probably good advice. You don't necessarily always have to say things exactly as they are if you're trying to navigate a fragile situation. But is it honest? When Aaron goes over to that wife and says, your husband really wants to apologize. Does the husband really want to apologize at that point in time? Or is he still sitting there with his arms folded saying, when she comes to me, then... And when he goes to the husband and says, your wife wants to apologize, does she really want to apologize, or has she just been duped into his little ploy that he does over here where he says, hey, your husband wants to apologize, and that's why she feels good? More importantly, not more importantly, that's a very important question. Are you allowed to outright lie, because that's what he was doing apparently, outright lie just to preserve shalom? What happens afterwards? What do you think? That couple never gets to talk about it? You think that would never happen? They sit down at 2 nights later to dinner, says, it's so nice that you initiated apology. And he's like, what? I thought you initiated. No, Aaron told me that you initiated. No, he didn't. He told me that you initiated. It's going to come out. So where's the value in this exercise? Then they're both going to turn around and say, well, the next time we have a conflict, if Aaron comes along and plays the game with us, we're going to see right through it because we've been down this road. And maybe they'll even have just a little bit of resentment against him. You played us. So we need to understand, what does it mean to be a student of Aaron? Aaron was not a person who developed a useful technique for bringing people together. That's not what he did. Now see, Jennifer's actually made exactly this point. It's not that he played us. Aaron teaches us how to look at the next person. This is why it's beyond the letter of the law. The letter of the law says you have to navigate and negotiate conflict because you have to avoid conflict. So all you need to do according to the letter of the law is ensure that it's not a hot war. But you don't necessarily have to avoid the way people perceive each other negatively, as long as they don't treat each other negatively, right? The laws of Judaism are about how you speak about people, Lashon Hara, and how you act towards people. That's the law. There's no law that says how you think about people. Why? Because it's difficult to legislate how people should think. That's beyond the letter of the law. Telling people how to think, how to perceive. This is what it means to be a student of Aaron. A student of Aaron means to learn his unique ability to know how to see people. Again, it's not that he came up with a method that was actually underhand because of the greater good of bringing people together. That's not the case. When he went over to that woman and said, "Your husband wants to apologize," what he meant to say is, I look at that husband and I see in him that in spite of whatever outward bravado he's showing, internally, he's a good person. Internally, he's a person who wishes the best for himself, for his family, for what Hashem wants. That's who he is. Unfortunately, due to circumstances, he's kind of lost sight of his own self. So together, we need to reawaken that part of himself as we need to reawaken that part of yourself. That's the conversation. This is not a conversation of we'll train you to reconnect. This is a conversation of we'll help you to remember who you are. That's the unique kind of love that Aaron taught people to have. To recognize the value and the goodness that will always remain solid. It's just a question of how deeply it will be buried. Incidentally, that is a reflection on the whole of Judaism. Judaism is not an exercise in how do you get a person to progress? How do you get a person to grow? How do you get a person from zero to hero? That is not Judaism. Judaism is an exercise of you have a soul, your soul is connected, you are one with Hashem. Now, how do we help you to experience that? Although it's not in Pirkei Avos, but it's very illustrative. So we've got a very good example of exactly this in halacha, in Jewish law. One of the most fascinating Jewish laws that exists. So the halacha brought by the Rambam in the laws of divorce. It's a strange place, obviously, to find a law that's going to speak about peace in the laws of divorce, but it's absolutely fascinating because in the laws of divorce it says this. We all know that the Torah makes it clear that Jewish divorce has to be initiated by the husband willingly. That makes life incredibly difficult for many people because you can get a vindictive husband who decides, well, in that case, I'm going to make her life a misery and not give her the get. So according to Torah law, and the Rambam writes this very clearly, according to Torah law, if a man who is required to give his wife a get refuses to do so, koifin oisoi ad she'omer roitze ani. Sounds like a very self-contradictory statement. You force him until he says, I want to. So we get it. You can force a person to do anything, but you can't necessarily force them to want to do it. So the Rambam is making a very interesting, and it's not his own words, it's the words of the Talmud. That's what it says in the Gemara. But it's a very interesting suggestion. Force him until he says, I want to. Now, how we force him, we'll leave that to your imagination. It's within the realm of whatever's legal in that particular country. In the good old days, when there wasn't the kind of oversight of the government, don't worry, they knew how to force him. Baseballs and kneecaps. So if somebody is roughed up and then says, okay, I'll divorce her, how's that roitze? How can you possibly suggest that that means he wanted to do it? It means he wanted to preserve his kneecaps. That's what it means. So the Rambam says something absolutely fascinating. And he says, because every Jew by nature wants to do what Hashem requires and wants to avoid any kind of inappropriate behavior, what we would call sin. It's just that your Yetzer Hara sometimes gets the upper hand and hijacks your persona. Therefore, sometimes a person needs a little bit of external pressure, not, God forbid, to break them, but to break that Yetzer Hara that has a chokehold on them. And when you apply that pressure and the Yetzer Hara shatters, the true person comes out. I want to do what's right. That's the kind of thing that Aaron taught us. When you go over to that person and you say, make peace, reconcile, it's the right thing to do, they know it's the right thing to do. At the core of their being, the true self, the neshama, wants to make peace. Sometimes people just need a little bit of assistance. That's what he means when he says that you should be a student of Aaron. A student of Aaron is not just a methodology of how to bring peace, but you should see the peace within the person even before you begin the process. It's a completely different way of dealing with people. Incidentally, we know this from the words of King Solomon, K'mayim aponim leponim, kein leiv ha'adam el ha'adam. King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, says that as water reflects a face, so the heart of one person reflects the heart of the other. In simple terms, what that means is the way you look at somebody will determine how they see themselves. If you look at that person as someone who is in the midst of conflict and needs to be rescued, they will see themselves as being conflicted. If you look at that person and see them fundamentally as wholesome and seeking peace, but they just don't know how to do it right now because they've tied themselves in knots by choices or bad behavior, then they recognize within themselves that the way I am now is not me, and then they want to change. That's what Aaron did for people. That's what Hillel wants us to do for others. And that's why the expression that he uses over here is Ohev Shalom. You should love peace. V'roidev Shalom. And you should chase peace. Now, whenever you use a word like chase, the implication is, well, it's obviously not here. It's obviously not close. It's obviously not easily accessible. That's why I'm chasing. You kind of have this image in your mind of running down the street, you know. It's like when you walk, as let's just say you're a frum man walking down the street and get a big gust of wind. And have you ever seen how a black hat can somersault down a street? And you see him like running after his hat. That's the impression that you get, Roy Dave, running after something. Running after implies distance. It implies that it is not immediately accessible. And it could well imply that the person that I'm trying to connect with is quite far from me. That's the lesson of Aaron. Aaron is Kodesh Kadoshim. Aaron is the highest of the high. Aaron is a person who is totally ensconced in the world of connection to God and holiness. The people who are in a state of conflict are so far away from his reality. This is not a geographical distance, but it's a psychological difference. It's this incredible chasm between them. Here's somebody whose whole life is oneness. That's Aaron. His whole life is oneness, being one with Hashem. And there are people who've become totally caught up in conflict. Now, the example that we've used, shalom, we naturally assume is conflict between people. And now you've got to bring peace where there is conflict, because that is the definition of the word shalom. You have no need for peace in an environment where there was never disparity, right? Logically, peace is only required where there has been conflict. And without getting too technical, that may be the difference between the words shalom, peace, and menucha, tranquility. You don't have to have conflict to be in a state of menucha, that you're calm. But it is normal to use the word shalom where there has been conflict. So the word conflict, the word machloikes, is antithetical to the world of Aaron HaKohen. He is a world of achdus, oneness, complete connection to Hashem. So far, we've understood that the conflict we're talking about is the conflict between people. They're not getting along. And the peacemaker has to come in the form of Aaron the Kohen Gadol, and he helps them to reconstruct their relationship. Equally, the exact same principle works if there's conflict between a person and Hashem. Conflict meaning that you've got somebody whose lifestyle is in conflict with what Hashem wants of them. Every single one of us is put here for a purpose. We're all gifted with life. We're gifted with a neshama. It's an opportunity that we have every single day to use our neshama in order to be able to have a meaningful connection with Hashem. That would be an harmonious life. That's how we're supposed to live. Sadly, not everybody does. Some people live without that shalom, without that peace. Some people live with a tremendous conflict, what Hashem wants versus what they want. Some people just find it difficult to reconcile, and some people deliberately go against what Hashem wants. So in the hierarchy of people, in the hierarchy of existence, the lowest point of the whole of existence is the person who rejects what Hashem wants. Let's just think about that for a second. So it's the time of the year we can safely talk about this here in the Southern Hemisphere. Mosquitoes. So let's say it's a summer's night and you're trying to fall asleep and there is that buzzing, 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 buzzing. What do you feel at that point in time? Well, you feel if you can only catch this mosquito, you want to kill it. And how dare it disturb your sleep? And then you know what's going to happen next. You're going to wake up with bites. So let's ask a simple question. Is a mosquito bad? Obviously not. A mosquito is not bad. The mosquito might be annoying, but the mosquito is not bad. In fact, when the mosquito buzzes around your head at night, the mosquito is doing 100% of what it was created to do. The mosquito is exactly aligned with what Hashem wants from it. Maybe you don't like what it does, but it's fulfilling its purpose completely. So yes, maybe on the hierarchy of spiritual entities, a mosquito is pretty low down on the hierarchy, but it still lives within the realm of entities that are at peace with God. Then you have people. People have the option of becoming less than a mosquito. In other words, people have choice. And with choice, we could choose to distance ourselves from Hashem. And if a person distances themselves from Hashem, they become less valuable in the whole purpose of creation than the mosquito, because the mosquito is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So it's aligned with Hashem. Whereas the person who rejects or rebels or decides to do something maliciously contrary to what Hashem wants, that person is misaligned from Hashem's purpose. So that person is now less than valuable in that moment. Of course, they can fix themselves and correct themselves and do something better in the next moment. But in that moment, they are less valuable in Hashem's eyes than even the mosquito. So that kind of a person we would call either a rasha, which is a definition of spiritual standing, wicked person. Wicked doesn't mean that they're a horrible, demonic personality. It just means that they're fighting what Hashem wants. Or we could use the word brios. Brios means creatures. This is somebody who has so demoted their own value that actually the only thing they have going for them is the fact that God created them. They are not adding value. They're not offering anything to society. So their only saving grace is that Hashem chose to make them. The distance between an Aaron, a person who is Kodesh Kadoshim, holy of holies, and a person who is Bria, who only has the value of the fact that they were created in the moment, or possibly even in their whole life, they've contributed nothing else beyond that. The distance between those two personalities sounds unbridgeable. That's the lesson of Aaron. So Aaron goes along and Aaron says, we have to care for and look for shalom. We have to find peace. And sometimes in order to find peace, you've got to run, you've got to chase, which obviously implies also a sense of urgency, but definitely a sense of difficulty. It's not so simple. If you're chasing something, it means that it's not automatically accessible. To create shalom, to reconcile that individual who is so far gone as to be considered only brios. We don't even give that person the title human because they're not behaving like a human should. I'm going to go out and reach out to that person and bring peace, help that person to reconcile with God. Using exactly the same methodology that he used to reconcile people between them, this is exactly the same methodology. I go to that person and I look that person in the eyes, and they need to feel absolutely that I am genuinely aware of the fact that in spite of their current brios status, At their core, they are shalom. At their core, they have a neshama that is connected to Hashem. It's just that the Yetzer Hara has them in a chokehold. It's just that for whatever reason, they've been completely misguided or distracted from their own worth and their own connection and their own soul. So to bring shalom, to bring peace to those people is exactly as I would to the spouses that are fighting. Really you want to reconcile. Really you do. I know that's who you are. I know that I believe in you. I'm not going to be fooled by the external trappings of a person who behaves in a particular way. I think it's easy for us to relate to this as parents. You may have a child who behaves terribly, but as a parent, you say, but you're still my child, and that's why I believe in you, and that's why I'm going to help you. Not because I'm looking to rebuke or reprimand you, but because I see the value in you. And I want to bring that value to the surface. This is the story of being a student of Aaron. This is the message that Hillel wanted to convey. And that is the message that Hillel lived in his own experience. Because as we learned last week, one of the most famous stories about Hillel was the prospective convert who comes to tell him, teach me the whole Torah as I stand here on one foot. The way we learned the story last week, it sounded like, well, Hillel is a very tolerant man. A person came with an unrealistic expectation, so much so that Shammai told him clearly, you're asking the ridiculous. There is no way to summarize the whole of Judaism, the whole of the Torah, in the amount of time you can stand on one foot. And we thought, oh, Hillel's a nice guy. He figured, you know what, let's accommodate this person, give him the time of day, and through that will become the opening and the gateway to further engagement. But now, based on what we've studied in the Mishnah, we have a deeper perspective on that story. Hillel isn't just tolerant. He isn't just accepting. He doesn't only see, let's find a way to connect people. Hillel looks at this individual and says, I see it. I see inside of you that this is not a futile or a mockery. It's not a futile attempt or a mockery of Judaism. This is genuine. I see it. I see inside of you that what you're saying on the outside doesn't necessarily tell the full story of what's going on the inside. On the inside, you want to connect. Therefore, it's my responsibility to facilitate that connection. And that's why he tells him the whole Torah as he stands there on one foot. Even though the person had behaved inappropriately, you don't come with that kind of swagger and say, I want the whole Torah on my terms. Sounds like a wicked person, sounds like a Rasha, sounds like somebody who's behaving badly. But Hillel follows his own teaching and the example of Aaron, which he expects us to follow. And he says, I'm not going to be distracted by that. I'm going to look beyond, look beneath, and see the goodness that is within that person at their core. When you take that attitude, then you suddenly realize, that the order has to be. Remember, the order in Torah is Torah. The order in which things are presented in Torah is a lesson in its own right. The order has to be you have to first love the person and then bring them close to the Torah. Unfortunately, for some reason, people sometimes get this the wrong way around, and they think, when I am able to bring you into the Torah, then I will be able to love you. Whether that's in so-called outreach, where we look at a person and we say, if I could get that person to become more observant, or if they could learn something, then I'd be able to relate to them, and then I'd be able to welcome them. Or when it's members of our own family who maybe don't live up to the values and standards that we've tried to educate them with. And then we think, well, when you come back into the fold, when you catch a wake up, then I'll love you again. Here, Hillel teaches us that's not how it works. The first priority is to love the next person. That is the overarching aspect of Judaism. That's what Hillel says, is the whole Torah and the rest is commentary. Only once you are clear and sure that you love the person, then you can bring them close to Torah. We actually see this in two important areas. We see that Moshe himself modeled this attitude, and we see that Hashem himself modeled this attitude. We see it with Moshe because Moshe at the end of his life gives the Jewish people a very heavy reprimand about all of the things that they did wrong during the 40 years in the desert. He reminds them of the times that they complained and how they rejected Hashem and all of that stuff. But you know what he does very interestingly, and Rashi points this out? He only reprimands them, says the Torah, Acharei hakoisoy asichoy melechoi meri v'oig melech haboshan. Only after he had fought on behalf of the Jewish people to vanquish the two major enemies that they were fearful of before they could cross over into the land of Israel. The great kings Sichon and Og. So Rashi says that's how it works, you see. Only after he did something for them, only after Moshe had shown how much he cared about the Jewish people to the extent that he cared for their well-being, physical well-being, only then did he feel that it was right for him to give them reprimand. In other words, first the love, first the care, then the spiritual input. We see that Hashem did the same thing. We see that Hashem took the Jewish people out of Egypt. We did not deserve to go out of Egypt by any stretch of the imagination. We know that at that point in time, we were at level 49 out of 50 potential levels of spiritual impurity, which means, as the Gemara says, if they had stayed there even one moment longer, it would have been the end. And we would never have been able to get out of Egypt. Not only that, we're told that Hashem, as we say in the Pesach Seder, Chishei v'saketz, he brought the date of the Exodus early. He showed this incredible love for us, that in spite of the fact that we had all but rejected him, we were completely invested in idolatry to the point that the angels at the time of the splitting of the sea said, "Hey, Hashem, why do you kill those idolaters and save those idolaters?" We were so bad that Hashem had to put us into quarantine with blood on our doorposts so that nobody would confuse us with the Egyptians at the time of the plague of the firstborns, because we looked exactly like them, and that's not just physically. And yet he did miracle after miracle, brought the date of the Exodus forward, took us out into the desert, cared for us like it was a 5-star hotel, and only after that did he give us the Torah. Because the order in Judaism is important. First the love, then the spiritual influence. Unfortunately, when we get it the wrong way around, it doesn't necessarily have the desired effect. And the last message that he teaches us may very well be one of the most important things to remember about this whole concept of how you reach out to somebody else and draw them close to a spiritual connection. He says you have to love even the most lowly human being, la Torah, and bring them close to the Torah. Unfortunately, what happens often is we're so excited at the prospect or feel so urgently that we have to reach out to somebody else and make their life a little bit more meaningful and connected to their Judaism that we think it should be done, so to speak, at all costs. And that's when you hear people saying, well, maybe we need to compromise on some of the halachic requirements or some of the philosophical issues of Judaism to be able to expand the net and to be able to include more people. And there are movements around the world that say better a watered down Judaism than no Judaism at all. Hillel says that's not kosher. Mekarvan la Torah. The objective and the goal over here is to bring them close to the Torah, not the other way around. And it's quite logical. If the Torah is the anchor, the foundation, the connection, the truth, surely then that needs to be conveyed. And the way you convey that is you say, let me bring you to the anchor, to the truth. Whereas if a person says, look, we can compromise certain things, well, then why should I want to be part of it? If it's up for negotiation, it's not necessarily so valuable, is it? They tell a story that in the 1940s, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was new in America. When he arrived in America, there was a massive welcoming committee. You have to remember that at that time in history, to get Jews and religious leaders out of Europe was a very big deal. He arrived in 1940. And so they said to him, listen, you have to understand that this is America. It's not the old Haim, it's different. So the first thing he said was, America is nit anders. America is no different. We are not going to now suddenly compromise on our values and Torah just because we're in a new country. So somebody said to him, Rabbi, you need to appreciate, if there's a fire raging, the fire of assimilation, America has always had an assimilation problem. People forget that the reform movement really took hold in America before anywhere else in the world. It's a very compromised kind of Jewish community. They said if there's a fire raging, you don't go get pure drinking water to extinguish the fire. You grab whatever you can, and that's what you throw in the fire in order to put it out. And the previous Rebbe said, yes, you would grab any liquid to put out that fire. Just make sure that you don't grab gasoline. Makar von la Torah means that the attitude we have to take anytime that we engage somebody and try and bring them closer to Torah is, it's got to be the real deal. It's got to be pure drinking water. The minute it becomes sullied or unhealthy because we're trying to accommodate or trying to be inclusive or trying to be accepted by what happens to be the current fad, then we're actually pouring flammable fluid on a raging fire. So Hillel has some very good lessons for us. How to see people, how to treat people, how to prioritize love, and thereby bring people closer to Torah. Please God, we succeed in doing exactly that.